The truth is still out there. Is the answer really 42? The optimum angle for white light to refract through water and thus form a rainbow is between 40.89 and 42 degrees. The number 42 was the first number to be retired from any professional sport. It was worn by Jackie Robinson, the man that broke the color barrier. There are two physical constants in the universe that are the speed of light and the diameter of a proton. It takes light 10 to the minus 42nd power seconds to cross the diameter of a proton. Because Google says so. So what is the question, you ask? Let's hunt that together. Welcome to the Breakin Broncos Podcast, part of the Answer is 42 Network. My name is Daniel Wetson II, and I am your host. We are brought to you today by AmericanBettingExperts.com and BetMGM. And welcome back to Breakin Broncos Podcast. Today we are going to be discussing, again, more injuries, but also some more fun things as we finally get a game to break down. We get to talk about that. Unfortunately, it was a loss, but hey, we can still have some fun talking about it, as well as previewing next week's game. And of course, as we end everything, with some wonderful Broncos picks and some silver linings that I know all of us need after that horrible loss. So again, just like last week, we're going to start with the bad. That way we can go ahead and get to the great. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's go ahead and do a real quick overview of who was on the injured list this week for the Broncos, which are A.J. Bouye, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Barron, Kareem Jackson, Cortland Sutton, Garrett Bowles, Tyree Cleveland, Trey Marshall, Bradley Chubb, KJ Hamler, and Albert O. Now, thankfully, even though all of those guys were on the injured reserve list, I'm sorry, not the injured reserve list, just the injured list, is that some of them are coming back. We got Cortland Sutton, who we didn't have Monday. He was limited in practice this week. Then you have Tyree Cleveland, who is limited but possibly able to play. You have Trey Marshall, who was limited Wednesday but a full participant Thursday, so we get that depth safety back. Then you have Bradley Chubb, who's just on there as an administrative thing. His knee's fine and he's good to go. And then you also have KJ Hamler and Albert O, who were both injury inactives Monday, who are rookies that are going to start their first game Sunday, which are going to add a whole lot of speed to this offense and is going to make it much more exciting. And I guarantee they score a lot more than 14 points. Now, moving on to the Steelers, they didn't have as many on the injured list, but they had some really serious names here, as they have had Ben Roethlisberger, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, Marquise Pouncey, Steven Wisniewski, David DeCastro, Zach Banner, and Alejandro Villanueva, all on the injured list at some point this week. Now, thankfully, they're going to get all of those offensive players back, as Ben, Deontay, Juju, James are all full participants Thursday. Now, those offensive linemen, though, had almost entirety of their starting unit. The only ones that are guaranteed to play this weekend are offensive tackle Alejandro Villanueva and center Marquise Pouncey. Those are the only ones that had a full participation or even limited participation in practice this week. Steven Wisniewski, David DeCastro, and Zach Banner have not practiced at all. And Zach Banner, as a matter of fact, has been put on the IR ending his season. So these things are huge, huge developments and can make a big difference on whether or not the Broncos are able to get a consistent pass rush. And if they're playing up against backups, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be nasty. So just with that in mind, I also want you to take a listen here to Vic Fangio speaking on these injuries and how they're handling it.
Well, yeah, I mean, nobody likes to see injuries first off, from the standpoint of the guys individually. And but we're good enough to overcome them. Yeah, I believe that. You know, we almost won the game tonight. I know almost doesn't mean anything. But we were competitive and played good and tough football. We had our chances in spite of all those injuries. And, you know, we'll keep going at it that way.
So, as you heard Coach Fangio touch on there, they're going to take a next man up mentality, and the roster moves they have made in light of all these injuries bear that out. As after they put Von Miller on IR, they promoted cornerback Devontae Bosby from the practice squad to the 53-man roster. Bosby is obviously filling Miller's roster spot on the active roster after cornerback A.J. Bouye dislocated his shoulder, as we discussed earlier. Bouye will be sidelined for several weeks, so they needed to add more depth. And in response to that move, they had to fill Bosby's former spot on the practice squad by signing Isaiah Irving, an outside linebacker who used to play for Vic Fangio in Chicago. Irving will provide more depth as an edge defender while Miller is sidelined. Denver also confirmed that outside linebacker Derek Tuska and safety P.J. Locke reverted back to the practice squad after being activated for Monday's game. The Broncos will not be activating probably either one of those guys or Irving this time around, as Trey Marshall is coming back, and they also signed Ryan Chickalo from the Saints practice squad. Since he was not protected by the Saints, they were able to snatch him up off the squad, and that will be your fourth edge rusher, as Chickalo did serve as a rotational pass rusher and special teams contributor with the Steelers, as he totaled 92 tackles, 7.5 sacks, and 3 pass breakups from 2015 to 2019. And as we stated, Chickalo will likely serve a similar role with the Broncos. As we keep going with the next man up mentality, I want you to go ahead and listen to Drew Lock talk about that exact thing. Again, soundbite credit goes to DenverBroncos.com.
That's what everyone's job is, to have one guy's ready, have the starters ready, and have the twos ready, and have the threes ready, just in case something does happen. But you can't say enough about Phil, can't say enough about KJ, and all the guys that, and obviously Vaughn. But it's next man up attitude, and we got to come out and can't hang our hat on it. We just got to go out and ball. So
there's really nothing there to add to Drew Lock and what he had to say. You always have to be ready. From number 1 to number 53 on the roster, it does not matter. Any given Sunday, it could be your time, and you have to shine. But I do think this is also a great time to segue into talking about the team efficiency and the DVOA ratings after week 1. Now, do keep in mind that you need to take these with a grain of salt, as this is just after week 1, and they haven't even added in the defense adjusted values to really give this the full breadth of where the Broncos are or where they will be. But it is a good thing to look at to see what they were able to accomplish after that week 1 loss. And right now, the Broncos rank 24th overall in DVOA at negative 17.1%, with negative 13.3% on offense, 23rd overall, positive 3.9% on defense, 19th overall, and 0.1% on special teams, which was 11th overall. Now, obviously, what keeps the Broncos lower on offense is going to be that anemic third quarter, where their first 2 drives netted a total of 3 yards, with 5 yards passing from Drew Lock and minus 2 yards rushing from Melvin Gordon. Now, they did score on their third, but obviously those first 2 drives are going to completely tank those rankings and the ratings, and they're going to give you that negative 13.3% on offense. Now, the defense isn't favored either, though it is not nearly as bad as the offense, and really a majority of that can be chalked up to the myriad of injuries all over that defensive roster. Also, we do know that the Broncos need to get better at moving the ball on offense and get healthy on defense, but those are kind of duh. The main thing that I want to take away from this is the ability to see a positive DVOA on special teams. This has been an atrocious part of this team for the last several years, and it's just been completely annoying to have to deal with a punter that cannot seem to understand you don't punt it directly at the punt returner and outkick your coverage every single time. So that was a wonderful thing to see, and we need to make sure that we give the credit where credit is due in that, after what we've had to deal with. All right, but that's enough love for the kickers. Now let's go ahead and go back to quarterbacks here, as I want to discuss Drew Lock and his DYAR, which is basically a measurement to show the overall value of a player to a team. I know there's been a lot of alphabet soup in this episode, but I don't have enough time to explain them in a 30-minute episode, so if you need to, Google's your friend. You'll be able to figure out what they are. Now, with Drew Lock, he had a DYAR of 23, which puts him at 22nd out of 32 starting quarterbacks. Now, it does sound bad on its face, but it's worth noting that the only class of 2019 quarterbacks to finish ahead of Locke is Gardner Minshew of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who finished with a quite impressive 97 DYAR. But Locke did finish ahead of big names such as Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, and Daniel Jones, with the main reason being that Locke didn't turn over the ball and didn't take a sack, while the other 3 did both. Now, we'll see if Locke can build on his week 1 performance, but there's 2 key statistics there that you really need to pay attention to, which are the fact that Locke did not turn over the ball once and did not take a single sack behind what is honestly one of the lighter offensive lines, will be nice, in the league. So those are very impressive things. On top of the fact that out of those 4 quarterbacks, including the 3 that were below him, meaning Drew Lock, and Daniel Jones are the only one of those 4 quarterbacks that lost the game. And we all know what Daniel Jones did and how him and Saquon Barkley were completely destroyed by the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. But Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins both had fourth quarter comebacks and won their games with a much lower DR than Drew Lock did. So this is another silver lining you should hold on to. We have a quarterback, people. This is evidence that the kid can do this. He's just young. He needs to learn. So have patience with him. And I would like for you to listen to him expound why his DR is going to just grow as he talks about his own mobility and getting outside of the pocket. Credit goes to DenverBroncos.com.
And then as far as me getting out of the pocket on a normal drop back, that's always kind of been a part of my game, to where if I feel like my first 2-3 reads are taken away and there's nothing left else to do, I'm going to go around and run around and try to make a play on my feet. And our guys are really good about scramble drill. They do a really good job of working open and getting friendly to me to allow me to make a play outside the box.
So as you can see, even though there's plenty of bad from Monday night, there's plenty of good to hold on to as we move forward. And speaking of moving forward, stick around after the break as we dive into this week's matchup and start talking about some of these amazing rookie performances. I just want to make sure if you are wanting to use my picks or just make your own, make sure you give our sponsor BetMGM a look. Just download the app and use promo code ABONUS, that's ABE bonus, to get free bets. Also, follow all of us betting experts from AmericanBettingExperts.com on Twitter for weekly competitions and free money given away constantly. Just follow @CO SportsFans, that's sports with an S, and DM them for details. And welcome back to Breaking Broncos with me, your host, Daniel Wetstein. Brought to you by BetMGM. BetMGM. Put our money where your mouth is. And welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us here as we go ahead and move on to this week's matchup of the Denver Broncos versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to start off here by talking about both offenses. First, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers as, yes, they were able to blow out essentially the New York Giants, which is a much more inferior opponent as to what the Broncos faced in the Tennessee Titans. But just per DVOA, they're in the top 10 in every statistical category after that just shellacking that they gave that poor New York Giants defense that's well undermanned. This week they have a much tougher test with a much bigger problem on their hands than they did on Sunday against the Giants, and that is the fact that their entire offensive line has been on the injured list this week. Went into detail of that earlier in the episode, so if you're just catching us now, go ahead and rewind back and you'll get an in-depth look on that. The reason that's big is because the inarguably best unit on the entire Denver Broncos team this past weekend, or this past Monday, was the defensive line. So if they are unable to get the 3/5 of their offensive line that are currently did not participate in any practice this week, that's going to be a huge problem for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, as this defensive line will feast all day. But that's enough about the Steelers from me. Let's go ahead and listen to Mike Tomlin talk about the Broncos offense and what he believes will give them fits.
On the offensive side of the ball, just been really working hard to familiarize ourselves with Drew Lock and his skill set. His mobility is impressive. Accuracy is impressive. His arm strength is impressive. And I think those traits allow them and him to attack the field just about at every spot. They do a really good job of changing the launch point. They do a really good job of stretching you and challenging you vertically down the field. He has a bunch of quality weapons, many of which we know about, guys like Fant and Sutton in the running back tandem, but he's got some new guys that are new to professional football that have a really impressive skill set as well. Judy's tape from last night was really impressive. His stop and go abilities, his route running abilities, his ability to get to speed quickly. I also have a great deal of respect for Hamler, who was not suited last night, but is out of Penn State, and we're very familiar with him regionally. He's a dangerous guy and a guy that's capable of taking the top off the coverage.
And Mike Tomlin just showed you why he is one of the best coaches in the league, as he did a beautiful breakdown of the Broncos offense, and I really have nothing to add. So we're going to go ahead and move over to defense here and start talking about